Good morning. I think we should take a look at what's happening in the world, or most of other countries anyway, and then we'll compare that to what's happening in the Philippines. See, the dilemma, the problems we're having in the Philippines is not limited to the Philippines alone. It's all over the world. So, that's what we're going to talk about. Let's take a look and see. Most countries, United States, Canada, even France, I think, is having problems. Belgium, it's all over the world. But I'm going to share with you what I saw, and then we'll talk about it, okay?
As a result, from the start of Thursday next week, mandatory certification will end. Organisations can, of course, choose to use the NHS COVID pass voluntarily, but we will end the compulsory use of COVID status certification in England. The government will no longer mandate the wearing of face masks anywhere. Mr. Speaker, from tomorrow we will no longer require face masks in classrooms, and the Department for Education will shortly remove national guidance on their use in communal areas. In the country at large, we will continue to suggest the use of face coverings in enclosed or crowded spaces, particularly when you come into contact with people you don't normally meet, but we will trust the judgment of the British people and no longer criminalise anyone who chooses not to wear one.
Well, I guess the way they're doing it in the UK probably will not work in the Philippines because we're just naturally hard-headed and we'll do whatever we want. But I still think that people should be given the responsibility. I don't know if I'll go to that extreme right now, but let's do better. Let's continue on.
Well, the various anti-mandate protests around the world have been getting little to no coverage, even though thousands upon thousands have been taking to the streets all across Europe each and every week. Now, Ravi covered the anti-mandate protest that happened in D.C. over the weekend, although maybe not the way I would have covered it, but nonetheless. But I do want to tell you about another protest happening right now just across the border in Canada. On Sunday, a protest in the form of a massive convoy of truckers kicked off in British Columbia with cheering crowds lining the streets and filling up overpasses. It's unknown exactly how many truckers are taking part in this convoy, but the estimated number is 35,000 to 50,000 trucks, with more trucks joining in as the convoy makes its way across Canada. And in many of the towns they pass through, crowds are waiting in sub-zero temperatures cheering them on. Some are even giving out cookies. The ultimate destination is Ottawa, where the truckers and their supporters intend to protest the Trudeau government over their newly implemented cross-border vaccine mandates. The Canadian cross-border vaccine mandate applies only to truckers who move goods across the U.S.-Canadian border. Truckers who stay inside of Canada are not subject to this. The new rule, which took effect January 15th, requires all truckers be vaccinated or, if Canadian, quarantined for 14 days upon arrival in Canada. If you're not Canadian and not vaccinated, you cannot enter the country. The Canadian government estimates about 10 to 15% of their trucking population is unvaccinated. Of course, now that the definition of what is fully vaccinated could be changed to include boosters, my guess is that number would increase significantly. And that's an important point to remember when looking not only at this protest, but every other anti-mandate protest going on around the world and here in the U.S. People are realizing that even if they were all about getting the vaccine and did their 2 doses and perhaps even vaccinated their kids, they could then be coerced into this new moving of the goalposts to include boosters. And they're not thrilled with that idea. A lot of people who are fully vaccinated are becoming quote unquote anti-vaxxers and joining these protests because they're not willing to be coerced into what could end up being bi or even tri-annual mandates. The Canadian truckers aren't only protesting the Canadian government's cross-border mandate rule, also protesting the U.S.'s same mandate, which prohibits unvaccinated foreign truckers from crossing into the States. The convoy intends to stay in Ottawa until the Canadian government drops the mandate and until the Canadian government asks the U.S. to do the same.
Wow. Canada has the same problem. And even the vaccinated ones are becoming anti-vaxxers, just like me. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, by the way. I am not. Okay, I just don't like the idea of people being forced. One thing I don't have it here, is in China. Can you imagine in China? They're getting the children in school and separating them from their mothers if they are not vaccinated, and they're putting them in a steel cage. Steel cage! And I understand the reason for that is Xi Jinping wants to make sure that China is going to be COVID-free in preparation for the Olympics. Can you imagine that? Now, are we going to wait until Philippines becomes like China? Something to think about. Let's move on. The next one will be an interview from Mr. Joey Concepcion, and he is the presidential advisor. Let's take a look.
Coming to America, you basically just need an antigen test, no, within 24 hours prior to your departure out of Manila. So that's not very hard to do, no, and that's accepted. And I thought that is a good way because in our case, when we leave America, we're required to take an RT-PCR test 48 hours prior to departure. No, so and that is a bit of concern because the RT-PCR testing capacity here is at the max. So some Filipinos going home may have a problem in trying to get an appointment, no, for these RT-PCR tests. I thought the idea of an antigen test prior to departure within 24 hours is good enough, no, to be able to provide enough comfort. No, it may not be as perfect as an RT-PCR, but an RT-PCR taken either too early or may also not be effective, no? So or too late. So this is some ideas that I've mentioned to our advisors that we should think about it. I believe that eventually, yes, you have seen in the news, Thailand, Switzerland has started to open up, no, and their quarantine. Some of them are removing their quarantine, like Thailand. UK has gone the extreme by removing face masks, vaccine passports, and all of that. They just will not do anything and allow, a super normal life. We are not suggesting any such a move as that. We're not also suggesting that we implement the no quarantine immediately. What I'm proposing to our IATF members is that a gradual move towards, to me, the removal of quarantine in the Philippines and moving towards home quarantine rather than facility-based quarantine. Because my own view is that it has not actually helped us from preventing Delta or Omicron from entering the country. I mean, you can see in 2 weeks' time, Omicron has swamped, NCR. And basically, if you look at the positivity rate in the Philippines and America, it's about the same. As we see Omicron start to subside, then maybe we can move towards a gradual phase out of our quarantine in the country. I believe that the airlines are struggling with 3,000 passengers daily to be accepted. That's not going to make these airlines, stay viable. And we are actually competing against other nations like Thailand and other countries for tourists. And if Thailand is starting to open, I think the Philippines should start to look at opening up. So these are things that I think moving forward, we will really try to engage with the IDF on starting to study this whole gradual move towards the removal of quarantine. And I think it will benefit not only our OFWs who come home for a brief vacation, but many of those people who don't have enough funds to pay for these hotels. I believe that we could move in baby steps. God will bring back the quarantine to 3 days for people coming to our country, and eventually look at home quarantine, eliminate facility-based quarantine and move to home quarantine, which will make it easier for many people. And I talking with Doc Ed Salbania, he mentioned to me that when maybe we're more fully vaccinated, then that could be a possibility, that we look at that direction. So hopefully the health advisors such as yourselves can really come in and help formulate something that we can really live with this virus and accept that it's there. We can get infected, but we are protected with our vaccines. So I think that's the ultimate benefit that we get from the vaccines, being prevented from serious illness and hospitalization. So hopefully we move on that direction, and we get an alignment, especially with, of course, our medical advisors who provide that guidance to all of us.
There you have it, guys. At least they're talking about it now. I hope something happens soon. First, the antigen test. US only requires antigen, no PCR test. Philippines requires PCR tests, and they're having difficulty delivering the results. People were complaining because they wind up overstaying in the hotel. They spend more money. It's supposed to be done right away, and it's not done. There's delays and delays. There is not an adequate facility to complete the testing. Just go with an antigen test. You get it like within 15 minutes, 30 minutes. That's what it's there for. Masyado naman tayong sigurista. Let's not do that, because what is the percentage of people coming back infected? Very tiny, and you're making a lot of people suffer. Same thing with the quarantine. You have got this quarantine hotel, but you are not monitoring them. And they have all kinds of policies. Some hotels will not allow you to double up in one room, husband and wife being separated into 2 rooms. That does not make sense. And I know the government probably does not mean that, but who's monitoring them? So we come with these laws. You need to be tested. You don't have enough testing facility. You need to be quarantined. Hotels are not being watched. So I think this thing makes sense. 2 years is long enough. 2 years is long enough. But the point is this: Philippines is not the only one going through this. The other countries as well are going through this. And again, I don't want to see us in a position where we're going to become like China. Not good. Not good. I almost threw up when I saw that news about what China is doing. I said, that's ridiculous. That's inhumane. So, guys, this is what I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll appreciate it if you share this with other folks who want to be entertained. And I'll appreciate it if you click like and do subscribe to my channel unless you have already done so. God bless and make it a great day.